Gary Danielson called Alabama Ole Miss with Vern Lundquist last Saturday, and he gets Auburn and Mississippi State coming up this weekend. That's good living for Gary Danielson, CBS Sports. Before I get to those games, Gary, when you watch Russell Wilson, explain to me how Russell Wilson works, that he would be a third-round pick, that everybody missed on what he had or didn't have, the intangibles here.
Yeah, it's impossible to it's easy in arrears to see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's impossible to project. I mean, how many times have you taken a player that go, you know, he reminds me of this guy, and you kind of force that position into somebody? You know, he's a little undersized. He's the next Drew Brees. Well, you know, you'd be finding a new job if you're a general manager trying to find the next 5'11" and 3/4-inch quarterback like Drew Brees. I mean, it's just hard to do it. To me, it's just as hard to find a legitimate quarterback as it is to find a starting pitcher in baseball. That's what those great baseball teams do. They just keep drafting pitcher after pitcher after pitcher, and you never know. And just one more little comment. You know, Chris Sale pitched for Little Florida Gulf Coast University here. You know, I can throw a stone to that university from where I live here. And the scouts came down here, and Steve Epstein was down here. He watched him throw for 15 minutes and said he can't play. It's just one of those things that's impossible to explain. There is, I think, a common thread among quarterbacks that are successful, and I think they have to be quick decision makers. And I think he is a brilliant decision maker. I don't know if I've seen, you know, much like Drew, they're able to take information, process it, and make a decision faster than the average guy.
But you have intangibles. You have feel for the game. And I don't know if there's anything that are there measurables for feel of the game?
Nope. I do know this. You know, I was a journeyman quarterback, but once I was in the league for 3 years, it was almost impossible to beat me out. I mean, you'd have to draft the first-string quarterback and give him the job. You know, like Brian Hoyer or Kyle Orton, you just figure out the game after a while. You're so far ahead in the decision-making and the feel for the game that you're just ahead. I hate talking about myself, but when I was 14 or 15 years of doing an NFL football, I never watched any college football. I didn't watch 2 minutes of it. And when I turned on the tapes for a college football game when I was doing my first year of broadcasting, I was shocked at how poor the level of play was. I couldn't believe how open the receivers was, and I would go to my wife, I go, how could I not have dominated this? It's terrible. Like, I must have really stunk, okay? And then after doing this for 5 years, I went back and stood on the sideline in an NFL game, and I was horrified how intense and how fast it moved. And I said, how could I have ever played one play in the NFL?
That's interesting. He's Gary Danielson from CBS joining us, Dan Patrick Show. Give me the scenario where 3 SEC teams are in the Final Four.
None. I have one SEC team, to tell you the truth, and it's going to be difficult for them to get 2. I think there's one thing, Dan, that has really, if we've learned one lesson about college football this year, is that it's moving in, not in the level of play, but in the competitiveness of the games, is we don't know who's going to win. It's like, you know, when Tampa Bay gets shut out and the next week they go up and win a game.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no difference really between the 15th rated team and the first rated team. And when I hear some of these people, and it just happened to be Jeff Long, and I know Jeff Long, he's the head of the committee, Michigan guy. You know, by the way, Jeff Long played quarterback, and his center on his high school team was Brady Hoke. So Jeff Long is the head of that committee. Okay, he's a football guy. And he said he's going to spend time breaking down film and watching tapes and watching games. Why? I mean, I do this for a living. I don't know who's going to win. I can't put on a tape and tell you if Auburn's better than Oregon or Ohio State can beat TCU. It's impossible. It's literally impossible to do. So the whole word best team to me is useless. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So you have to go with most deserving. And I'll ask you a clear question here. What would you do if Florida State runs the table, but in the last ACC game of the fourth quarter, Jameis Winston gets hurt and can't play? Do you put Florida State in the championship? Clearly, they're not, quote unquote, the best team. But 90 other guys in the team just got them to win an undefeated season. You have to put them in the Final Four. To me.
Yeah.
So the word best is meaningless.
Okay, give me the SEC team that's going to emerge here just to get into the Final Four.
We started out the year with 5 power conferences and Notre Dame all controlling their own destiny, if you asked me. Because even Auburn a year ago, remember, nobody had them.
Yeah.
And they earned their way into the game. Well, as we start the second week in October, we're down to 10 teams that I believe control their own destiny now. Just 10. Now, as those teams lose, there's going to be less, okay? Because there are 6 in the SEC that still control their own destiny if they win out. Ole Miss, Auburn, and Mississippi State all control their own destiny, and Auburn plays Mississippi State this week. In the East, Georgia, Missouri, and Florida still control their own destiny because all of those teams, if they win out and win every game, will be the SEC champion, and they'll be in. I think Notre Dame controls their own destiny. I think you'd agree. If they win every game up the rest of the way, they'll be in the Final Four. I think Florida State and Georgia Tech, who are undefeated, control their own destiny if they win out. And I think Arizona from the Pac-12 controls their own destiny. After that, everyone else needs help. If you ask me one team that I would pick above everybody else that has the best opportunity, I would say Florida State. They get Notre Dame at home, and they play in a weak division with the ACC.
I got Dak Prescott coming up next hour, Mississippi State quarterback. You've got that game this weekend. What have you seen with this kid? And is it a fair comparison, given his coach, the number he wears? Granted, he's right-handed, not left-handed, but is he a Tim Tebow-like quarterback?
Yes. We're all going to get killed doing that, making that comparison because of how, much publicity Tim generates. A lot of it deserved. He earned that stuff. But I can tell you this. If Dak played at Florida State with Dan Mullen, one of the high-profile schools, and Vern and I and Brent and Chris, and now Chris and Kirk were doing their games 8 times a year, he'd be just as high-profile as Tim was. Yes, he's a little faster than Tim. He's as big as Cam Newton running this offense. He does not throw the ball as well as Cam Newton. He runs the ball 45% of all the yardage for them, and they run the same offense. A wonderful kid. He's huge. He looks like a defensive end of the field. But I have to say, when I went and watched an Auburn practice and Cam was there, I came away, forget the offense. This guy can throw the ball like an NFL quarterback, and obviously he can.
Can you make sense of the Pac-12?
Yeah. The Pac-12 is like the SEC West. Everybody has flaws on football teams, NFL teams, college teams. Everybody has flaws. Okay. The only difference now between the NFL and college football is in the NFL, you can go 10-6, have a great season, and still make the playoffs. Can't do that in college ball. Someone will have that fortunate season and make a run, and they will, get to that final game. But that doesn't mean if you shook them all up in a bottle again and replayed the games, it might be 4 different teams. No one's that much better than anybody else.
I saw this headline where Alabama now in decline. Is Alabama in decline, Gary?
I thought the headline was, no, they're not in decline. What's happened is they don't have the walkovers that they had before. It was much like in the 70s when Ohio State and Michigan, they could have literally rolled out their helmets and won 8 games. And then they had 2 tough games. Alabama, when Mississippi State and Mississippi and Arkansas were down, or however that West was, and then they'd cross over and play a down Tennessee or Vanderbilt or somebody like that, They just had they're not only that, they're good, okay, but there were 6 games a year they could not lose. So they had a half a schedule, and they got up for those games. Well, that's over now. They have to get up and play every week. And if they don't play at least their B-plus game, they could get beat. Modern football, everybody's willing to throw the ball on first and second down. Heck, in college football, Dan, they allow the offensive lineman to go 3.5 yards downfield and still throw the off. If they did that in the NFL, the scores would be 60 to 55. Okay, they got some crazy rules in college football, and the offenses are dominated, which means if Trevor Knight at Oklahoma has a hot day, you could lose, and there's tons of those teams out there right now.
Have fun this weekend, and are you going to meet Katy Perry? Did you meet Katy Perry?
Well, I had a couple funny things. I mean, I said, Vern, I've been doing this 25 years. I never thought I'd say Katy Perry and Vern Lundquist in the same sentence before, but that happened. And then I've been doing it 25 years. I've covered every conference. I believe, I might be wrong, I don't know for sure if I've been to Cal, but I think I have. I think I've done a football game from every stadium in the country. I've been in the SEC now for 8 years. This is my 9th. I've never done a game in Starkville. So I'm looking
cool.
forward. Yep, it'll be fun.
If I was just coming over to go to one football stadium, not game, but I'm going to the tailgate, the atmosphere, what's the one place you would say above all else, that's where you need to go to watch a game?
It is really what makes the SEC a little bit unique because it is a social I don't want to get too far off here out in the weeds, but one of the scary things that happened this week was Michigan State, which is having a great season, talked about after the game that they had concerns about the students not showing up for the game. I have my thoughts about why that happened. That does not happen in the Southeastern Conference. It is still a social event where it is important to go to the football games. If you like the pregame festivities, you can pick 8 different schools here and get about the same. There's famous parts of every school. It's really part of what sells college football is that 2 hours before the game. If you're just into watching the football game in the stadium and, the historical consequences and setting of it, I still think Alabama's stadium to watch a good game is the best I've been.
Have fun this weekend. Tell Vern we said hello. Thank you, Gary.
Always. Thank you, Dan.
It's Gary Danielson from CBS. Auburn, Mississippi State this weekend.